material conditions, winter and latent. We divide people in groups out with those outside our group outside scope of justice and justice. Who would comfort of courtesy, someone who knows better knows courtesy changes. We do not open our minds to efforts, we draw concepts on between those who are in and of more circle. Those who fall outside of more excluded become either invisible to mean so. We do not acknowledge injustice they suffer, and material conditions come first. Matsuda. C. The more from the same particular person, which knows concrete particular abstraction, away out of competition with the person of abstraction, theory discuss an aspirational liberalism with no connection with those people mean. Contemplating people's lives, high talk, can mask racist and sexist ugliness, and particularism is good. Root cause claims ignore specific injustice. Even if something is generally bad, we need to examine the specific situation. Papas. Theories whose starting point seem to be injustice at larger seem to critique can be accomplished only under a broader critique of society in its entirety. We must treat the particular injustice not a global social pathology, but some reason colonialism or total ameliorate particular injustice suffered in unique situations. The force that come domination considered by context. There isn't a single causal explanation. The state is inevitable. Speaking only to powers through policy meetings, the only way to create social change and debate, cover some control of governments to what's citizenship about citizens, bear the obligation to discuss what government should be doing next, and then motivation for activism, laws, narratives not connected to political power, conflict, role playing, promotes active lending of power, the simulation more empowering thing, embedding power than hegemony, imagining social revolution, no sufficiency, the difference on Capitol Hill, cut the card there, and material forms of rebellion are prerequisite to any method that wants to access the path that changed. Fitzpatrick. Subversion can occur by exploiting ambivalence within the law. Severe resistance consists of actions that open heterotopic space of autonomy, which are the source of alternatives in society. Resistance is always restricted to itself against hegemony. Resistance requires sites. As sites destabilize the condition of their existence. A site makes an act possible, and that's the means by which you become aware of transformative potential. A site must facilitate a critique of existence by the information can be used by the self interaction with other sites of resistance to carve out the space of both allows to imagine social alternatives. Inherency. 2017 is the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. This is a direct speech restriction on anti-Israel sentiment. Stern, pro-Israel Jewish student feel victimized. The worst remedies to prohibit speech. The Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. The speech for colleges presented a common sense. The House Judiciary Committee put it into consideration until 2017. It should not be considered in any form. The act would require the DOE to consider the Department of State's definition of anti-Semitism. Definition contains examples related to criticism that show Jewish students are protected under Title VI. If this bill becomes law, it is easy to imagine calls for admission to stop pro-Palestinian speech. Fact students and faculty members scared and silence administrators will err in suppressing speech. The bill makes it impossible to critique Israel. People are automatically considered anti-Semites. Times. The act is fraught with First Amendment problems. The bill's overly broad definition of anti-Semitism with the distinction between an independence and criticism definition unfairly replaces anti-Israel speech with anti-Semitic speech enforced would violate free speech rights. Violation of Title VI that could lead to a loss of federal funding and boycott divestment sanctions is massive. Large-scale coalition like this is most likely to create change. Additionally, BDS spurs independent movements to create change. Ibrahim, BDS is central to war campus activism being driven by BDS. Palestinians have an incredibly strong voice they need to empower, and that's what BDS does. It helps in these discussions about Israeli parts of the communities across the globe. Almost every campus is a Palestinian solidarity group. This reflects the growth of student solidarity. BDS is good. It's a critical method for awareness. Butler. BDS movement is which offers support for major institutions that support the Israeli state and its military, the academic and cultural boycotts and pressure on cultural institutions that have failed to oppose the occupation shock requires those who think it's not the place to criticize the government when those institutions understand the would be the beginning of the end of the boycott. The goal of any boycott has become obsolete. The plan. The United States Congressional House of Representatives should not restrict constitutionally protected speech by refusing to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. Stern is our solvency advocate. Check back landfall claims to CX. We can resolve the issue of semantic aesthetics and focus on solvency, which comes. Solvency. BDS works. The government is forced to react and defend itself. Bargudajan. Israel seems terrified by BDS. Netanyahu declared BDS strategic threat. BDS poses a serious challenge to Israel's system of oppression. The Israel's apprehensive about Americans who oppose policy, especially those joining BDS campaign, is all perceived as a threat rising to center among Jewish figures. Israel is threatened by the effectiveness of nonviolent strategies and the negative impact they have on Israel's standing. The recent decision of BGG has sent shockwaves. BDS is working and creates social pressure, i.e., the Gaza Strip remains under stacking siege, and the West Bank is also the wall prevents them from working the land. Logic behind BDS is that for Zionism, the other must be assimilated and subjugated. BDS or a partial process of decolonization of Palestinians. Anti-colonial resistance depends on the higher moral ground they occupy. BDS activists do not buy the faint promise that redemption lies at the heart of negotiation problems. Settler colonialism. BDS is forging a new leadership within the unity of Palestinians. The struggle against apartheid in Africa. No academic institution collaborating with exclusively white supremacies. BDS is working. Israel is intensifying construction settlements of all made Israel increasingly isolated in the world. Large majorities view Israel mostly negatively. Global critiques of the U.S. are required to create change at home. State violence is justified and connected by out-of-state violence. The AF defends the avenue to create change. Butts 15. Interlinked system of white supremacy shape the violence we oppress in the U.S. are in a critical position to build a necessary connection for a global liberation movement. Struggle strengthened in connections around the global radical tradition has always been rooted in igniting connection under the recognition that liberation is intrinsically tied to liberation around the world. The movement for Black Lives Matter is tied to liberation movement around the world. State violence within the U.S. is intimately linked with empire. Underview. Counterinterpretation. Any is defined as part of, not all. Cambridge Dictionary. Use a negative statement, some or even the smallest amount. Thus, debaters may specify a type of speech if they have a solvency advocate, if the app is about a congressional bill, if the app is disclosed, and if the app is about a form of speech that can be considered harassment. The definition outweighs the resolution as a negative statement. We meet the rules about anti-Semitic harassment. The actors, Bill Stern, are advocated, and we disclose. The planks resolve all of your offense. Your case list is applicable when most of your restrictions are not based on harassment. BDF is one of the few available congressional bills. C. We have a specific solvency advocate which uniquely meets your predictability claims before. The app has been up since Harvard Westlake, and you know about it 45 minutes before the round. That means you have functionally zero offense. Standards ground. The net rule only justifies whole rights after no restricting time, place, situation, no immediately, meaning that this here debate is very clear way in comparison between ground offense and what well done predictability claims. You compare the word of the AC in your interprets one without any apps that detail specific situation. That means you can pick out of the app entirely. There's no way to weigh unique offense. A restarts the app, and B turns your predictability claims because you justify by unpredictable picks every app. Unpredictable picks out. Wait, there's no ability to weigh against the independent impacts. The end of any unique education. We lose learning opportunity when you have the same arguments over and over again, like a harassment TA. Ground internal link effects. We have no unique ground. You always assume our impacts. We have no efficacy. Also outweighs your interpicks. Unpredictable picks infinitely available. A recruits all the condition you detail. B removes the ability of the app to leverage the AC. The voter is the standard. No voter. We'll go to Wolfer. That's it.
Cool.
We cut standard is rural education and everything past Capitol Hill on Coverstone. Not we, me.
Alright. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go to this card. It says BDS creates social pressure. What is social pressure?
So that's criticisms, like, it's literally criticisms pressuring the state of Israel. Like Netanyahu has been specifically forced to create.
Is BDS like a form of protest?
BDS is typically a form of protest, yes, on college campuses.
Okay.
Large-scale vocal protests.
So then, on this Coverstone evidence, what is the implication of Coverstone? Is it that we should defend?
We should use the state for action.
We should use the state. So
a world without the state for action is just like standing up and saying something. And
well, that seems distinct from we have to defend the state. Can we talk about the state and learn about the state, or do we have to necessarily defend it?
We don't argue that we have to defend the state as it is. We would argue that any policymaking approach must understand that the state is a required aspect.
Sure.
Not so much that the state is a good thing.
Okay, if we analyze the state, does that mean Coverstone?
Analyzation of the state and then an alternative that says we do an action that resolves the AC or resolves the offense of the AC without the state would link into Coverstone.
Why?
Because you are not using the state to create some form of action.
Wait,
do I
need to use the state or just analyze the state?
Okay, if you go for a critique that analyzes the notion of the state,
Mm-hmm.
and you say usage of the state is bad,
yeah.
We would say that usage of the state is inevitable to resolve any of the impacts of detail.
That's fine.
That's just how Coverstone is usually leveraged.
That's fine. Okay, so this BDS, what is the impact of these independent movements? What do they do?
That's the solvency section. The Bargudajan evidence details that it's already stopped multiple companies from putting billions of dollars into the industry, 200 billion specifically from PGGM. It also says that the growing amount of American Jews who are joining creates more pressure that Israeli advocates have to respond to and creates change. That's the Aid evidence.
What change?
So PGGM is an aspect of the change.
What is
and
the
it
change?
also, it's not so much that it creates like entire physical changes. We're not like claiming that we solve settlements entirely. We argue that the only way to create like activist notions of understanding these aspects of the system that is held in Israel is one where we know that these things exist in the first place.
Wait, to understand the notions of these systems in Israel?
We need to know they exist, and BDS is a good movement
what do
to
you mean
always
we know
keep
they
those
exist?
present.
What happens after we know that they exist?
So the argument is that a continued, again, the solvency section, that PGGM is a very good aspect of the tangible aspects of the AC, namely that we stop companies from continuing to support settlements.
Right, is there other impacts coming out of the app?
Yeah, that would be, well, first is the Butts evidence, as a way to kind of frame how we change things in the states. We need to talk about issues like this. And then specifically in Bargudajan, it says American Jews who oppose a policy pose a serious challenge to Israel's system of oppression. The Gaza Strip
What is
remains
their system of oppression?
Settlements. Aid puts that into a frame of reference. There's a massive wall cutting through the West Bank where they cannot work their land. Settlements are being built illegally, as recently ruled. Is it 4 or 5?
You're the Emory graduate. It's up to you. I think it's 4. Yeah.
I'll chat.
And Green Hill and Harvard Westlake were 5, so I don't know if there
Usually a
was
big tournament is 5, but I don't know.
These days it's just me.
2-op case. Oh, you know.
We're on case.
Yeah, on top of it.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Oh shit. Shot everywhere.
Is that good?
Yeah, wait.
Wait, what's the order?
2-op. It's ending.
Oh wow.
That thing's a little shaky.
You
So
better,
careful.
you better.
Yo, my pants get dirty every turn.
Make sure you cover.
You wet
What
yourself.
is
like
this?
fuck.
It's turning.
Oh, you spilled something?
Yeah, he's like, oh, Mark,
Your
you
pile.
your pants? Doc, I'm like 6 inches taller than
Sometimes,
you.
I know.
You said you sent it, Kevin?
What's it? Yeah, it's loading. Yeah, it's ending.
I got it. Yep.
Alright, cool.
It is the interpretation the affirmative must defend the public colleges and universities honor stricken constitution to protect its speech clarify they may not defend any other act besides called public colleges and universities west encyclopedia of American law define public colleges and universities use colleges falling to private and public public institutions are institutions of public constitution by statute to receive funding from state and federal government prohibited from exercising a directional or educational institution violation to defend U.S. Congressional House of Representatives, which is separate from public colleges and universities. A standard first limit to explain because only was that it affects speech on college campus. I mean, you can defend that could affect campus speech like USF and campus student and organization college campus particularly is key to fairness. Since preparation is progress and having position results key to engagement under your role, but we can never learn how to face structural question if you just shift away from the debate. Second is ground on a university after shift that decides critiques of the other resolution not this key generics grants as a composition that applies to all topical last coordinate generics are key are uniquely key against plan since their hyper-specific plan can deal in counter stock currents in the case people critiques of the act can apply to every plan through its jurisdiction about this question to affirm been negated better than constitutional resolution means that outside a just obligation to vote for the efforts not to defend the public college university clergy not meet the resolution semantically since they have a change subject sentence from public college universities and United States government jurisdictions and independent voter determines the considered fear to judge and debate otherwise debate becomes incoherent fairness is a voter since the ballot asks who's the better debater you can make a decision accurately the round doesn't drop the debater a recourse of the argument always incentivize his position because worst case scenario you lose access to argument best case you want any piece of argument drop the argument a debater incentivized to future be checking of views and jury views in the second a B point drop the argument to severance you can shift from your activities in the whole resident 1 AR this is unfair because the 1 and C strategy promise on the easy plan is to allow the shift to proceed for further VC and no going back around is ready excluded supposed to behind all the other prints the rest of the round is already a result of competing interpretations a reasonable based question was reasonable for arbitrary intervention of the judge to evaluate the round even if you said a line is arbitrary allowing you to set a line that lets you get away with DBSB reasonable discussion interpret when often are unreasonable so either even under reasonably but debater than most often win or ugly classes competing interprets that have better debaters when their interpret counter interpret no RV is a point RV from theory from taking abuse I want to initiate theory against it abuse keep my computer when theory debating RV especially the object since the new were defending beforehand I'm ensuring a huge prep skill on theory ready B reciprocity there's not an ambiguity for link terms or impact terms can impact term fairness or for who are linked term with arguments why violate use the voters generate often on issue giving a new way out of constituents Q second off. Free speech is a noise, is fear of inclusion, but a collection of frequencies. When you speak, you're liberal to present a frequency with liberal and student in that frequency. But gain free speech if the app is not free, it's allowable speech within the public the paradigm including will always result in exclusion. Those marginalized who incoherent members of frequencies that are not between humanity, therefore unable to attend James 14. Liberals and runtime dialect of exclusion or inclusion making noise that it's just mechanisms exclusion from them different distribution of noise that excludes someone else's voice, none and but everyone has voice that is legitimate recognizable humans for real which hear me to be slant citizen making noise or exclusion never registered as this sense of barely is the absolution of exclusion. There the flesh is not have voice of liberals subject because not several lines, five, no out of the sense of this, no from perspective, little humans as flesh is, in all because vibrating beyond the humanly acceptable spectrum. This humanity figures in the production of man as a racializing assemblage. Black day system simultaneously places inside now, so man created a condition for the emergence of social and demarcation of the human, not quite human, said we should foreground the deconstructing man as a category that's realized deconstruct, it's to endorse to make a better deconstruct the European Wakili 3, the religious self-given a man as a man race can define human race, things around the flesh to human, the white flow subject encounters fullness being human relation deficient black sexual racialized subjects and terminated being rather than forming human is defined by organism order surgery into gender theory the flesh coding services so you can become anger and the ontogenic flesh racialization figures the masculine the color line distinguishes human from not quite human the political lines creates not quite human from monotonous eggs trash from man we must question epistemic word that creates just this human racializing assemblage and maintain distinction of the superhuman explanatory organs with various class gender sexual orientation on different facets of man versus human struggle cut the card I struggle the alternative is to queer sound frequencies to embrace sound setting to turn ourselves away from academic humanism we a firm and queer orientation that asks sound of one is to speak whose noises we can hear these studies trying to put us in new ways of being new epistemology James 2. The queer material and historical system modern man's domination conquer criticism human the current that our massive human is Europe on modern space wants to why supremacists find through previous rating beyond the beyond the register visible to white human or audible to speech queer orientation to the alternative calibrated frequency perceived consummation the potentiality of materials which was a limited question like in this alternative figure really how do we have to change ourselves to begin a corporate war the universe at this point is not the way they help materials better to speak self-drive but to not to feed them back into academic rather to follow their lead out of academic humanity sound conveys us the world of man is something other than humans compared against another conveys information spiritual so as to transfer us to other ways of being. Our queer orientation is convivial to embrace the vulnerabilities from limited position outside political political resistance tragedy from the space of not quite human. We create a new line of life, a new chapter in which can therefore racialize assemblage our affirmation examples new genres humanity through modes core 9 convivial and social resistance program categories and events and counter and use attributes subject surrounding notion revolution against social change convivial always entails experimental destabilization subject identity then social change convivial always entails internal makes identity politics explode possibly and possibly convivial does not lead to politics to come rather feature enabled to the open materiality was the bodies as a place to make convivial as open to its own dissolution self and recognize the political routine must be open to the possibility that might disrupt and alter conditions for amateurs as no longer needed net benefits versus unintelligibility restriction on speech force people to find other avenues of speech we can't speaking previously the dominant can't hit then hemorrhage one against the Jews can't understand and can't capture and manipulate speech second all cells case only alternative modes of thinking moves away from us when we solve root cause ideas such as non-bodies from arguments ideal subject institutions control over what forms of speech are acceptable they are never able to incorporate things that never have actually put institution meaning and through the deem allowable campus all that with which is the weatherman be or the better form disorder you can skip James 3 then on the app overview 1 the impact of the critique is zero policy failure to win the link that the universe cannot account for certain forces of speech, and then we won that you don't grant free speech, you just grant allowable speech. It's independent reason for you to negative term given to the act of you don't actually grant free speech. The alternative is there's no risk of possible net benefit any interpretation that yet doesn't do anything good and see we impact on all your net benefits anyway. Second, epistemology is independent about it, the apparent including excluded voices will always exclude the ability for those emergent system people cannot speak to say whether they want your app or not because of the essential universe you're just tuned out. That's term with even only the alternatives risk factor epistemology should determine the app is a good idea. Then on the app itself, first on your waiting related card, this is another link to create the idea that, for example, if we're excluded from the moral sphere, that is inherently bad, or that there's no hope, and that is exactly what we're critiquing. We should find potentiality in being excluded from the moral circle. Then I'm going to see materiality in terms of verse 1, our alternatives say it's very, very material because we talk about the material instances in which we do not talk about how we can use the state, but rather how we can work against the state. It's a better accent. It's also a better explanation of material lines, i.e. why material lines happens first, and then also third, insofar as we win some form of exclusion, that means we outweigh on scope, i.e. you cannot account for the material instances of material lines that you exclude via your ideology. Then I'm happy to particularisms for no. We need a general theory to be able to filter out what particularisms matter. That's the reason why particularism is in itself not good. We need to first have a general theory to understand what particularisms are good or bad in the first place. Then uncover policy making because no, this card is just looking at why policy. We do not say we work in a world where policy making is not important. It's just a question of how we orient ourselves with policy. Also, cover so as a link to the creed, i.e. that the only possible method for liberation is through working through the state, or i.e. letting the state recognizes an example of incorporation which destroys the liberation movements in. Also, this answers back all your policy making arguments in. The UC BDS is the UC BDS is critical. No, this that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
What comes first, theory or critique?
I'm specifying.
Can you please?
I didn't specify in the speech, so you can make arguments why they're good or bad.
Okay, so you won't tell me which one comes first.
Yeah.
Thanks. Let's talk about the link to the critique. What specifically about the AC is the link?
Sure. Okay. So first, the idea that like we find liberation strategies through, for example, working through the system, or letting the system recognize it. Like for example,
What specifically links to James
sure.
14?
So first, on the app specifically was the winter and land card. That the way that you frame, i.e., what impacts matter, what
Sure.
impacts matters in the self-recruit link. Do you want me to explain that?
No, I want to explain the James 14 link. What about the AC links to James 14's liberalism's dialectic exclusion?
Right. So the idea, like, because free speech is in itself a frequency, right? For example, when you ban free speech or when you restrict it, that speech does not just go away. That speech just operates on a frequency that is not visible to, for example, these powers of these institutions. And so only if we work under the institutions, i.e. the unintelligibility net benefit coming from the alternative is another way to sidestep the institution.
Your argument is that we should restrict all speech so that the state doesn't look at the speech.
Well, no, the idea is that there's potentiality in speech that is restricted, i.e. sure, even if the university cannot hear the speech obviously still exists.
Okay,
it just
so
exists in forms
let's
that the
talk
speech
about
cannot
the
hear.
war critique. Okay, what does the alternative look like? There isn't a specific alternative text, so I'm sort of confused.
The alternative, well, we did the alternative to clear sound frequency. I guess that is explained by James and also Poir. It explains that our alternative, it's a question of, for example, we understand the potentiality of having to work.
Sure, what does that mean?
Sure, that means, like, for example, there are other liberation strategies that require us to, for example, not have our speech restricted.
Okay, so what does this look like? Like, what is a world where we embrace this? Does this mean that, like, people in prison and people outside of the normal confines just speak and we embrace that?
Wait, what do you mean?
What does the world of the alternative look like? Does it just mean that persons on the edge speak?
Wait, what do you mean by?
I don't know what I mean,
Sure.
'cause I
Well,
don't know
what
what
they
it looks
mean
like.
is that they work, for example, like in, for example, on college campuses, right? Speech that is restricted, can those forms of speech or those forms of communication could work under the system, for example, in things that the university has no control over, stuff like that.
Okay, so we come back to the issue I had earlier.
Uh-huh.
Restricted speech is good because universities no longer look at it, and we have potential
Well,
with
no,
that speech.
that comes from the unintelligibility net benefit, what I was explaining, is that
Okay.
that forces people to find other avenues of speech that these institutions that you critique, these institutions cannot incorporate them, they cannot.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about theory. Okay. Let's talk about this ground claim. You say non-university actors shifts out of disads. What's the warrant? You just sort of say it.
If I read this as the
Like what disad?
Reasons why the university is bad, like for example, if I.
But this university is still an aspect of the ACs.
Right. The
mainly-
point is that you can, because you have widened the scope of what you defend, just saying
That's
like,
sensory
well, this is
problem,
just an
specifying a type
effect.
of
This is just
speech.
this is just an
Yeah.
effect of what you do in the app versus like this is what you defend.
Yeah, I understand. 41 seconds left. Order is new off. New off, theory critique. I'm sending it now.
New off, theory critique.
Yeah. It's sent. Let me know if you're both ready. Yeah, one sec.
Interpret the negative is asked which of two offs comes first. They must specify how each layer is in the context of the round. Violation. You wouldn't specify memory standard strategy. Not specifying layers makes a huge one-air strategy and collapse. You have the ability not to take stance sound suddenly take stance later. Two implications. A shifting affix means you remove stasis point out of the ability to take back the one-air, meaning you shifting out of a huge layer of offense. It's impossible to react to. Be one-air flex. I don't know what argument to allocate time for, seeing as each of them is on the same voting layer. You wouldn't even tell me to weigh between them and making it impossible to create winning offensive. There are two high layer of implication that I have to equally win. My ability to make the differentiation doesn't change. You could shift out of your position and create new arguments to sell back for the time forced to allocate create these winning layer strategy internally to fairness and scheme the round makes it impossible to objectively determine the better debater. Crossplay is voters additionally always comes first. Even if you go to a collapse point, every single point you collapse to, if you say K over theory, is immediately going to reify the arguments that we created in the round, which means you've always got to vote on this if he tries to layer above this. There's the only way, it's the only thing that can outweigh. And if we win enough defense on his T shell, that's enough for you to automatically vote on this thing. Comparative to T, let's go to the AC. Overview to the AC, too much conceded for you to win the round. The first argument is that you've given no independent role of the ballot coming out of the critique, which means the only thing you can evaluate is winner and latent, namely structural violence, which one takes out this differentiation link to the critique since he didn't give us anything to use, otherwise it's non-unique, and two, is the only thing you can focus on. If we give you material conditions come prior, even if there's a unintelligibility to the AC, then we've given you a certain metric to decide how we can stop structural violence. You have conceded one argument at the top of the framing case that was the Fitzpatrick evidence, which is always going to be internally intent of your emotions, namely that material conditions and material movements are required for us to create any change in the first place. The AC is always the internal link to the Eurocentrism. If you haven't given us a material condition or we give you a better material condition, you always prefer, which means you've conceded the bottom card in the Butler evidence that specifically says that BDS is a movement with material implications that always tries to create the change that we've detailed. Additionally, you've conceded the solvency evidence that says that the only world is one where we can stop the Israeli state, which means we have comparatively stopped the Israeli state with 100% link, and we link it to something about unintelligibility. There is a weighing claim to be made here. We stop a Palestinian system of domination, which is a material ending of the harms that he details, which means you have 100% solvency that accesses all the implications that are argued in the critique and gives you a specific metric to determine what stops structural violence. So long as we have that, we have an impact way against the critique. If there's a ton of defense on the nature of the critique, then you automatically prefer a world where we stop more structural violence than the critique does. And you've also conceded the Butts evidence that says the only thing that we can do is focus on out-of-state violence before we focus on in-state violence, which means the affirmative is always a prerequisite to critique. There's no way for you to stop any in-state violence if you don't focus on the out-of-state prior, and we have given you the only method, and you have conceded the only method to do that is through a BDS movement. Even if it's unintelligible or intelligible, the only thing that we can do is use the metric provided. Theory. First, we use the colleges and universities. Every action that the U.S. takes means the colleges and universities have to follow. They have the ability to choose how this method is pronounced, which means that we create the conditions where you get all the access to links, you have zero offense, which means you can't weigh this shell. Additionally, counter-interpretation, you can defend the USFG if the app is disclosed and if it has a solvency advocate. Disclosure is the reasonability bright line. We've given you a specific one, which is not arbitrary and is used often. Independently, says that if we win enough defense and we prove to you that you could have linked offense, that takes out every one of your offensive claims. The first argument that you make is this limits argument that says that you explode too many apps, but with the two arguments that were detailed in counter-interpretation that stop that from happening, you have enough to stop your limits offense. Additionally, we create more ground, i.e. you have a better offense because we make it nationwide. They have to follow it in every college compared to me defending maybe one college at a time. Comparative worlds means that you automatically prefer a world where you get strength linked to 100% of your disads and 100% of the arguments you've detailed. Independently, you couldn't give me a single example of a disad you can't read. So long as you haven't done that, then there's no way to do that. No shifts in the 2 and R. You didn't bring the warrants in the first place. Don't try to bring in the next part. Jurisdiction is outweighed by pragmatics first. Pragmatics actually going to decide how we just around semantics, no matter, especially with two competing interpretations. Additionally, jurisdiction is up to you. It's not up to us to decide how to jurisdict. Let's go to the critique. The first argument is a turn. The negative, the affirmative is a negative state action. We take away state power, which is net better. We're trying to stop the state that you're dealing bad. The second argument is a turn that we use good speech, i.e. the buts argument is an internal link to every one of the arguments you've detailed. Additionally, this isn't a link. Additionally, you can go down to the alternative. The first argument is permutation. Do the affirmative and the negative. The net benefit is the buts evidence, so we use the affirmative as a method to stop out-of-state violence. The next permutation is do it in all other instances. We could use other forms of restriction. We specify only one, which means that you can access all your links. Permutation, do both. The net benefit is fact check evidence because we can use a material form of difference to create change.
What was this third crime?
Permutation, do both. We can use a material form of conditions in anti-Semitism, and you can have unintelligible speech outside of anti-Semitism. 2 minutes.
Is the new shall drop the argument though?
We cross-applied all your voters.
Okay. So the order is going to be the new shell, old shell, F, K.
Okay.
Actually, K, F.
Anything new? Okay. Can you write down the counterinterpret you're reading?
Yeah, sure.
Just
I
if
could
you can
reply-
email it.
I could reply to you.
So, his shell, af, K theory.
His shell theory, K, F.
Okay.
I'm just typing the counterinterpret.
Sent.
No, I was.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay.
One second.
Wait, yeah, you can.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
First one is usual counter-interpretation. The next is the converse of the interpretation. I give the other debater the option to weigh between both of the either K or theory I. If you had right arguments on the last to weigh between both, that would allow you to better determine what strategy you go for. That solves all of your options. I.e., if you had made weight, that would determine how much spend you would have to spend on each I. Because if you would weigh between them, then I would have to answer the weighing back. And then when I started off meaning that this solves all of your strategies. Also, second is better educational benefit. I.e., we can learn between the. We also have to learn between the. Also, we get to learn between the different forms. We get to learn a way between different forms of debate and forms of argumentation. Also, third is a strategy. I.e., if I have to weigh in I have to tell you in this. If I have to tell you across in that means in the next piece functionally I dropped one. I have to dropped one side of the flow because I can no longer go for it insofar as you're going to get collapsed to one of the function takes out all of the one to see strategy, which kills my strategy. That is an often on the counter interpretation. Also, you should not drop the beater. I.e., if I kick one of these, you should still solve the option. If I kick one of the two options, you can still collapse in the two R to one of the options. That's sufficient for you to be back. For example, the case. So go on theory. First, you conceded no RVIs. Also, you could cross-apply that to your own arguments. It's the reason why you should not be winning on the T. So you can give no other independent reason why you should be winning on the T. So go on the K. You severely missed under the cover of the for K. First, extend the link that extend the James evidence at the top. One sec. Saying that free speech is no fear of inclusion, but collective frequency. When you speak are liberals that emit the frequency, and that free speech is not free, just allowable speech, and that means that the paradigm of inclusion will always result in the exclusion of those on the margins of society, and insofar as those people on the margins of society are not able to send, i.e., if they're not able to protest against, for example, Israel, or they're not ever able to speak in the first or their speech, given that they are not heard, they're seen as not having hope. The fact that you refuse that potentiality is what causes more material violence. Is that is the link to the use here negative state action, but no, you're still a form of action because you defend these state, and also second is that you say you use the state as you still use the state as a form of incorporation. That is it that the state is still a form of you're still using the state as a form of incorporation. Sure, your negative state action, but the way that you orient yourself to straight is still a form of inclusion. Even if you even if you say protest against the state, that still is not respond to the unintelligibility argument. Then second, you say you use good speech, but idea that you can filter out good speech versus action in the form of incorporation, i.e., those forms of speech that are more recognized by the Western man, or i.e., those closer to the institution, or those forms of speech are the considered good. So the contemporary good or bad speech so requires you to first understand the liminal spaces, which you cannot do then. Extending the alternative to queer our sound frequencies. Extend to embrace sound setting to tune ourselves away from academic humanism. We affirm a queer orientation that asks not upon the right to speak who noises we can hear. That is another form of materiality. It's not a question of potentiality within these spaces, and that is a question of how we work under these spaces. You can see the two net benefits. First is unintelligible restriction on speech, force people to find other avenues of speech. We speak in frequencies the dominant score cannot hear, then hegemonic institute cannot understand, and they can deliver, not capture, or manipulate speech. This is the reason that the alternative solves back for the entirety of the app. Insofar as we say we are good with it, we're a better form of protest. We are just form of protest that works under the system. Then on your permutations, first you say perm, first do both, because you can you have out of state violence, but no, insofar as we do not specify borders, it's not a question in state versus out of state violence. You say all violence is organized. That's how we heal evidence. That is a reason that that's not a net benefit to the permutation, because we saw you completely solve that. Also, second, you say you do the alternate instances stuff for the F, and no, we specifically because in that way we say that we are a better form of solving back for the F. So even if so that means we are a better form of solving the F. If we say under your orientation you cannot solve the issues that you bring up in your affirmative, mean there are no benefits to the F. And then you say we can work with the things outside of anti-Semitism, which functions same argument. No, we have one specific why these forms of violence are caused by the conception of whether man. So specifically why these forms of violence seem to be resolved through the alternative and not through the F, and reasons why the F is specifically insofar as we misundercovered them like the not the F. First you go for the material argument. You can see all the arguments as to why we are material. First you say is that we are material, we're better, we're just a material that is differently oriented against the second is that we're better explanatory material violence. We can say we are better explanation of why material violence happens versus what causes material violence. That is the healing root cause argument. And then third, you say when we are third, you can see that we used to exclude some forms of speech, and that means you exclude certain forms of material violence that the institution cannot hear in the first place. Then, also, you say I need an independent role about. I read a role about, and actually, it's on the critiques on the role about you. North America would you deconstruct the European man that was read on the Wikili evidence. You can call for it after the round. It says that because the Wikili's root cause of everyday violence, that's the reason why when you deconstructed the European man as a prior question. Also, you can see the independent links coming out of the Winter Lane card specifically on your paradigm. You can never resolve these insofar as you say that those on the marches society, those who are not considered within these groups are considered excluded, and that they have no hope because we recognize the potential. That is the point of difference between the app and the critique. You say if you're not working with any system, if we are in these out groups that they have no hope. That is where we differ. We say that is a form of potentiality that should be that is better than the form of potentiality that is because of things like unintelligibility, which you can see out the last piece. Then you say that you have material movements are more important. But first, you can see all the responses to materiality, and also you can see that you're worse under you for all form of material as far as you get conceded exclusion. Then you say I need then you extend a bunch of offense out of the app. But you conceded epistemology. Sorry, I should have done this at the top of the case, but extend the offense at the top of the case is extend the second overview. Epistemology is the independent voter, i.e. the pattern including excluded voices, always excluded bitter for those Marxists and people can not speak whether they want your app or not, because no sense that to the university just tuned out. That is a terminal defense. Only the alternative is risk of accurate epistemology. Insofar as you have conceded epistemology, that's another disadvantage to the app. Is the reason why the critique solves the entirety of the affirmative is also you prove the link, i.e. the epistemology you have created through the winter and lane part, or that analysis that you orient your app around is a reason you recreate that same bias. Is the reason we turn the app, and you should vote on the critique.
Okay, 40 seconds. Okay, order is my shell, critique alt.
Your shell critique alt.
Yeah.
Going around? Okay. You know
Hey.
what it is?
Huh?
You know what it is?
Stop bothering me, dude. I'm in the middle of the day room. You're gonna throw me off the edge. Let's see what I already get. There will be an overview on my shell.
Okay.
And then, yeah. Overview to the shell, there is simply not enough work done on the shell independently. You have conceded the argument that says the shell will always outweigh because of the situation that you created coming into the 1AR, namely because I didn't have a way to understand what's going on. Additionally, you have proven that you have just collapsed to an issue without giving me the chance to understand which issue you're going to collapse to. That substantiates all the claims making that say that the shell always outweighs. Even if you win the critique, it doesn't matter. There's a higher layer to go through. The theoretical arguments in detail that just going for one argument without giving me the understanding of which one layers first directly recreates the conditions the shell asks for, which means the shell always comes first. We'll go to the shell proper. You have conceded all of the arguments, namely that you were always going to shift out of a claim and then go for another one that we didn't know how to go against. You have conceded all this offense, which means the critical issue here is weighing, namely between the one offensive argument he detailed and the few defensive arguments he made. You have conceded the argument that says that there's a massive amount of offense you can always kick out of without me understanding which offensive layer you're going to go for, which does do things. First, makes it impossible for me to be flexible going into the 1AR. I don't know how to allocate prep, making it a structural skew in the round where I've lost multiple minutes of time that you can just kick out of by making new weighing claims and shifting out of your initial claims. The second argument is that you have made it structurally impossible for the 1AR because you can get rid of 2+ minutes of the 1AR by saying that's fine, but imagine this is a layer that comes prior to the 2 minutes you just spent on case. So long as that's true, you have 2 structural abuse claims to make that automatically outweigh any of these strat skew claims, namely him saying that it becomes a little harder because I get to choose the collapse point that's detailed that in this specific round I have proven offense that shows that you automatically vote for the shell that outweighs. We'll go to his counter-interpretation. The first argument is that this is a bad counter-interpretation. Cost me more time. I have to make the weighing claims, which one means that you can just disprove the weighing claims and get rid of all the arguments that I made on a shell with additional time on the weighing claims, and 2, doesn't change the implicit arguments of the prep allocation, making it impossible for me to allocate prep going into the 1AR. You have made an education argument, no education voter, which means you have no way to evaluate it. Your strat skew argument is not good enough. There are 3 reasons where you can check back multiple layers. The first is conditionality. You can kick out of the top layer, which checks back my ability to collapse. Second argument is what you exactly did in the round, namely your ability to say no RBIs or make differentiating claims that change the layers. Third argument is that layers are going to be inevitable, which means even if it's skewed slightly, it automatically is outweighed by the offense detailed by the theoretical shell, which means the only offensive argument is 1 outweighed, 2 check back by tons of defense, meaning under competing interpretations with a shell that outweighs, you always vote for the AC, critique alternative. nowhere near enough work done on the buts net benefit, namely that the affirmative is a prior step to any conditions that are detailed because we critique the outside. You have conceded the inherency claims that say that BDS no longer exists in a world where we don't do the AC, which means it is impossible for us to critique the Palestinian state that was detailed, which creates material conditions that are consistently impossible to solve, which means you have conceded the implication from the buts evidence that says the first thing you have to do is critique out-of-state empire, critique any in-state reaches. So long as that's true, the affirmative is always an internal link to the critique. Even if you win any disads, it's impossible to do the critique or create any of the instances of the critique without doing the affirmative, which means the permutation do both effectively drop. You just said, oh, we are all countries. You have not substantiated that claim at all, and you conceded all the reasons you are not, which means the affirmative is always a prior step. Even if it's a bad step, it's the only step we can take to stop the Eurocentricity that you detail. I win on both layers.
Okay.